Electoral reforms in India is the subject of my today's discussion. Elections to Parliament, that is Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, state legislatures, that is Vidhan Parishad and Vidhan Sabha, offices of the President and Vice President were held several times under the aegis of the Election Commission of India. The performance of the Election Commission in this respect has won acclaim all over the world. So it can be called a globally admired institution in conducting polls freely and fairly. But there is no denying the fact that still there are a number of important problems faced by the Election Commission in conducting polls freely and fairly. Different committees were formed to address this issue. Way back in 1975, Tarakunde Committee on Electoral Reforms was formed. In 1990, the all-party Dinesh Goswami Committee on Electoral Reforms was formed. In the same decade, that is in 1998, the Indrajit Gupta Committee on State Funding of Elections was formed. In 1999, the Law Commission of India published a report regarding electoral laws. In the 21st century, just at the beginning of the 21st century, in 2002, the National Commission to Review the Working of the Constitution, known as the Venkatachalaya Commission, it also was formed and it gave its report, detailed report about the working of the Indian Constitution, including election-related matters. These committees and commissions already referred to suggested a number of measures for electoral reforms. But before they suggested that, they identified a number of serious problems in our electoral system and electoral process. So my first task will be to point out some of the problems identified by these bodies. The next aspect is the proposal for electoral reform suggested by these bodies. This is the next aspect that I will be discussing. The third aspect is the steps taken by the Election Commission following these reform proposals. The fourth aspect is that there are still some problems. There are still some challenges ahead. There are still some problems to be resolved. And finally, the concluding part. So these are the 5 different parts into which my discussion will follow. So the first part is the problems identified by different bodies. One, the mismatch between the vote share and the seat share in the prevalent, in the current first past the post system introduced in India. Here, a candidate may be declared elected by a minority of votes. That means a candidate may not get 50% votes, may get less than 50% votes, and then he is elected. How this is possible? Because in this system, in each constituency, there may be a number of contestants, say 5 contestants. So the remaining 4, B, C, D, E, they all taken together garnered say 70% of the votes. B 25%, C 22%, D 20%, etc. So they taken together, they get 70% votes. But A, who just received 30% of the votes polled, is elected because all other candidates, B, C, D, E, received less than this vote. So this is a peculiar situation in this type of electoral system known as the first past the post system. In fact, in this election, in the 2014 election, the BJP received 31% votes. So it should have received 31% of the seats. But it actually got more than 50% of the seats. It should have received 168 seats. But it actually received 282 seats. So this is a mismatch between vote share and seat share in this type of electoral system known as the first past the post system. Second, the composition of the commission. Earlier it was a one-man commission, single-man commission with the chief election commissioner. Now, it's not possible and rather it's not desirable that an election commission is manned by a single individual only, however wise he may be. Moreover, since 1993, there is a three-member commission with chief election commissioner and other election commissioners. But they are appointed by the president and the president acts in accordance with the advice of his council of ministers. So the commissioners are appointed by the ruling party. So these are partisan appointments. So it's difficult, if not impossible, for these election commissioners to act independently of the executive. 3, the problem of imperfect voter list, electoral rolls. Deliberate exclusion of genuine voters, deliberate inclusion of fake voters in order to give advantage to a particular political party. There may be a number of serious problems regarding electoral process, rigging of elections, intimidation of voters, etc. These are some of the malpractices used in India very often. So these are some of the serious problems. Then there are alarming number of candidates with serious criminal background. Then frequent use of caste and religion in the process of mobilizing voters. 5th, excessive cost of elections and the question of getting legitimate funds. Finally, problems of hung house, hung Lok Sabha, hung Vidhan Sabha. That is, no party getting majority of the seats in the Lok Sabha. And therefore, it's very difficult to form a government. So, this may lead to political instability, both at the center and in the states. Now, the proposals for electoral reform suggested by these bodies. The first proposal regarding the mismatch of vote share and seat share in the prevalent system, first part the post system, the Law Commission suggested a mixed system. In this sense, the Law Commission is in favor of retaining the first part the post system for electing the existing 543 members of the Lok Sabha. So for electing these 543 members, the prevalent system shall be retained. But the Law Commission suggested that additional 25% seats may be increased in the Lok Sabha. That means about 138 seats should be created, should be increased. Now these additional 138 members will not be elected by the same procedure. They will be elected by a different procedure known as the proportional representation system. We have followed this from the German system. In Germany, the lower house of parliament the members of the lower house of parliament members are elected in the same fashion. So following the German pattern, the Law Commission suggested that the additional 138 members will be elected on the basis of proportional representation. And the parties will get the number of seats on the basis of the number of votes they secured. So there is a congruence between vote share and seat share in the proposed electoral system. About the composition of the election commission, the law commission, it is now suggested that the chief election commissioner and other election commissioners will be appointed by a newly constituted body comprising the Prime Minister of India, the leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha, and the Chief Justice of India. They will select these commissioners, and thereby this will weaken the charge of partisan appointments of election commissioners. Preparation and maintenance of flawless, faultless electoral rolls are basics of any electoral system. So there must be a coordinated effort on the part of the EC, Election Commission of India, and the state election commissions to prepare and maintain flawless voting list, that is electoral rolls, by using modern technology, computers, etc. Next, introduction of EVM, electronic voting machine, to combat hooliganism by miscreants, to combat rigging of elections, intimidation of voters, etc. The next issue is the persons charged with criminal conspiracy must not be nominated. They will be nominated only when they will be allowed to contest the election only when they are declared not guilty of a criminal charge. And for that, a special court to try these cases must be formed. Election campaigns aimed at inciting caste hatred, communal hatred, these attempts must be dealt with seriously. The persons indulging in such activities must be punished. In order to tackle the problem of hung house, it is suggested that at the time of introducing the vote of no confidence, simultaneously a constructive vote of confidence has to be introduced, so that the party which challenges the ruling party may form the government after the ruling party is ousted from power as a result of the no confidence motion. So this is called constructive vote of confidence. The next aspect, the steps taken by the Election Commission following these reform proposals. For instance, there is now a computerized database of electors. That is, creation of a structured set of data about the electors held in a computer. 2, there is the post of booth level officer to be created in charge of electoral roll for every polling station, so that electoral roll can be revised and updated constantly. Thirdly, the mandatory affidavits to be submitted by the contestants. The contestants will have to submit compulsorily affidavits disclosing their academic qualifications, disclosing their assets and liabilities, disclosing their involvement of criminal activities, if any, have to be furnished to the Election Commission. So this is another steps taken by the Election Commission. There is EVM introduced since 2004 in order to combat rigging and booth capturing. There is tamper-proof, damage-proof video cameras to record these activities, to record any unfair means adopted by any political party or their candidates. Finally, the Election Commission has now been using online communication to monitor every polling station on the day of poll, to see, to inquire whether any untoward incidents, any violent incidents has taken place anywhere at the time of elections. Despite all these steps taken by the Election Commission, there are still problems to be resolved. So the next aspect is the challenges ahead, the problems ahead. The problems are still there is criminalization of politics. Criminals are still in the fray, electoral fray. These criminals are misusing their muscle power, their mafia power, their money power to vitiate the electoral process in India. That has to be tackled seriously. This is still a problem not yet resolved, not yet been resolved by the EC. So, let me conclude that the reforms, or rather electoral reforms, is still relevant. The issue of the problem of electoral reforms is still relevant. But mere discussion at the academic plane, at the academic level, is not sufficient. What is the need of the hour is to launch movements led by different civil society organizations. There are a number of civil society organizations in our country. So, social movements must be launched, spearheaded by these bodies to eradicate the evils of electoral malpractices. One observer comments, let me quote, "The issue of electoral reforms should be given the form of a social movement with the active participation of civil society organizations." And these civil society organizations must explore the ways and means to eradicate these menace, these dangers that stand in the way of free and fair election. So let me sum up. I pointed out that different committees and commissions identified a number of serious problems for conducting elections. The committees and commissions suggested certain measures, suggested certain proposals for electoral reforms. Thirdly, I discussed the steps taken by the Election Commission following these proposals for reform suggested by these august bodies. Finally, fourthly, the challenges ahead, the problems yet to be resolved. And finally, the concluding part where I said that I felt the necessity of social movements led by civil society organizations in order to curb the danger of malpractices at the time of elections. Thank you all.